in other genres. So I'm just going to start off actually by showing you about 12 pictures that are mixed. They're not portraits. So the first one here is a high jumper. This is taken at about 3,000, 4,000th of a second, and it has frozen the actual raindrops behind the competitor. He was in competition. He was taking part in the Northern Ireland Ulster Championships doing the high jump. And the only thing I have to confess is that the bar was yellow. So I just thought with his blue and orange shoes that it would look better from a visual point of view if the bar was orange as well. So I changed the color of the bar. This is a statue in Belfast in the docks. It is the internal light from a lighthouse that has been decommissioned, and the ferry from Scotland would come sailing up Belfast Lough here, and the famous Titanic Museum is just behind here to the left. It's called the Great Light. So I'm sure all the landscape photographers amongst you will know why we talk about the blue hour. Once the sun goes down, you have a certain period of time before the sky goes completely dark that you end up with this lovely blue in the sky. So that's why we call it the blue hour. Some nature, a little coal tit. Before I started doing nature photography, this would just have been a nice little coloured yellow bird, but now I know it's a coal tit. This was only taken in the last fortnight up in Cushendun on the north coast of Northern Ireland. It's taken with a digitally converted 5D, or sorry, 30D, Canon 30D, that has been converted purely to do black and white infrared. So I always thought that this laneway would make a perfect subject for infrared, with the green grass and the foliage turns white and you get nice detail in the clouds, etc. And then the stone pathway goes dark. Color infrared. This is a local monument, long-standing, probably goes back hundreds of years. It's called the Giant's Ring. There's a giant sort of grass circle that was probably used for some sort of pagan rituals many centuries ago. And this stone structure is in the middle. But I thought that it made, I don't do much color infrared. This is the goldfinch. So the background there is an out of focus gorse bush. The lesser spotted woodpecker. The background there is a bluebell forest. So you have the out of focus bluebells in the background. And I was in the Lake District in October. This is, I think it's Buttermere. So it's the lone tree at Buttermere. Ideally, you would have that tree coming out of there. But even though I got there at 6:30 in the morning, as usual, there was somebody there before me. So I just had to stand slightly to the right and get what I could. But at least I was fortunate to get a little bit of colour in the sky. This is Ireland's tallest mountain, Slieve Donard, this one here. This is Newcastle, County Down, and I've used obviously the reflections in the sand as lead-in lines. It was taken on a very cold New Year's Day. The red squirrel, they're great little photographic subjects, the red squirrel. Another female high jumper. And the red pole, and another red squirrel. And this is Spelga Dam in Northern Ireland. So this reservoir supplies a lot of the water for the Northern Ireland. This is the heart of the Mourne Mountains, and you have this big overflow. Normally the water level would be right up here, but that was quite a dry summer. So those are my mixed images. The rest of it will all be portraiture. Let me see, where are we? So I'm going to try and select these in a certain order. No, that didn't work. Quick preview. So this was one of my very early successful portraits. It's called Stephen, and I suppose the story behind this, or the tip behind this one, would be photograph your friends. If you have some friends who have a lot of character in their face, do ask them to sit. If you can't convince a friend to sit for you for a portrait, how are you going to convince a stranger to sit for a portrait? So this was taken in a camera club. I was doing an off-camera flash presentation, so the eagle-eyed amongst you will have spotted the reflection there in the eye of there's an upright stand and a half umbrella. So I had the umbrella half closed to concentrate the light in on the face. And this one got me a gold medal in Edinburgh in the 150th running of the Edinburgh exhibition. And that always fascinates me, because 150 years of the Edinburgh exhibition, you know, where were people entering from 150 years ago? What were they entering? What cameras were they using? How were they doing the prints, and how were they sending them, etc.? So oh, we've got somebody drawing on the screen. This one is another very good friend. It's called Moody Hootie. This guy is a member of my camera club, and he also is an extra in Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is filmed a lot in Northern Ireland, and quite a few of my friends act as extras in the filming. So Gerald is one of them. So if he shaves his beard or cuts off his hair, he's out. But when you put the eyes up to the top of the frame, it sort of makes it slightly sinister. So it's always a good idea to keep the eyes up towards the top of the frame. I always try and get the eyes up on at least the top third of the frame. This is a lady that maybe a lot of you who have judged national or international photographic salons will have seen pictures of. She literally flies around the world as a photographic model. She's now married and living in Canada, and she's had a baby. So unfortunately, I think we have seen the last of Freda as a model. She's Dutch. She was living in the UK for quite a few years. She was based in Edinburgh, but she came over to Belfast quite a lot, and Ireland quite a lot. And I always offered her 2 or 3 days work, consecutive days in the studio. But she's just a beautiful face to photograph. Really sky blue eyes, and really knows how to pose. You know, always have the hands side on to the camera. If you have a hand face on to the camera, it's as big as the face. So you should really always try and break that wrist, turn that wrist sideways so that the hand and the fingers are side on. This is how I like to light my portraits. So we've got a lit side of the face on the left, and then this is the shadow side. So the light is coming from the side, and this then creates the shadow of the nose. And this is what's called the Rembrandt triangle. So the little triangle of light below the eye on the shadow side is called the Rembrandt triangle. So this is the same lady, but just to compare the light. So that's side lighting. This is front lighting. So whenever you light from the front, the left side of the face and the right side of the face are exactly the same. So the shadow of the nose now goes down rather than to the side, and the shadow goes below the chin. So you're relying very much, this is why we call it a beauty light. It's more or less shadowless, and you're relying on the beauty of the face to carry the picture. This is a technique I use quite a lot, just a simple piece of material or a shawl around the model's head, and it frames the face beautifully. Same lady. So we've gone quite close in here. So the tip on this one is don't be scared to crop in. Some people, old-fashioned people, might say, oh, you've cut off the top of her hair, you've cut off the top of the head. Who cares? It's not about her hair, it's not about the top of her head, it's all about her beautiful face. So again, we've got this side lighting. The left side of the face is the lit side, and then she has turned her head towards the light, and that means that we're seeing more of this face, side of her face, but this is the drama side of her face. This is where the shadows are, and there's the Rembrandt triangle. This guy is the oldest photographer in Northern Ireland club photography. He's 95. He's a member of Ard's Camera Club in North Down in Northern Ireland. And he is absolutely stone deaf. You have to really shout. You would really need a megaphone to have a conversation with this guy. He is so deaf, but a great character and actually quite talented in terms of the Photoshop stuff that he does. So even though he's 95, he knows his way around digital editing. So this was taken with a medium format digital camera, a Pentax. And again, we've got my favorite lighting style with the light coming from the left. There's the catch light in the eye. So you always see the clue in the eyes. We've got the catch light on the left, and then we've got the shadow of the nose, the Rembrandt triangle, and a nice depth to the shadows without being pure black. There's just enough detail apparent in the shadows, but that's quite a simple styling. It's really just her face, her shoulders, and the pearls. So go for simplicity. This guy is a local barber in Northern Ireland, but he loves to dress up. So he just basically, even though he's a barber by profession, he loves to come into the studio and just dress up and wear whatever you ask him to or whatever he brings. So it's always a good idea to try to make friends with people who are maybe involved in local amateur dramatic societies or stage companies, because they're very, very willing to dress up. It's not a portrait of him as he maybe would put up on his own wall. It's just meant to create a portrait with a little bit of character and styling. This one, the cat is called a rag doll. I'd never heard of a ragdoll cat before, but apparently they are like £1,000 to buy. They are really expensive. The cat's eyes have not been retouched whatsoever. They absolutely were as blue as they look in that photograph. The idea here was to sort of style the model as a sort of a queen or a princess, etc., and then the blue in the cat's eyes to match her costume. But the model actually loved cats. I didn't realize, but the model absolutely loved cats. So whenever I told her that she was going to be modeling with a couple of ragdoll cats, she was just beside herself with joy. All natural light. So whenever I use natural light, I use it in exactly the same way as I do studio light. So she is against there's a corner there, which is the edge of a window. So this is the lit side of her face, and this is the shadow side of her face. Now this is a white room with white walls and white ceiling. So there's a lot of reflected light going on. So the shadows are actually quite soft and filled with light, but the trained eye will still see the Rembrandt triangle there and the very soft shadows, and you can see the catch light in her eye from the natural window light. Oh my goodness, look at this face. So this is Tony Davies. So I took this on my lighting workshop that I held in North Wales, and Tony very kindly agreed to pose. Now, this is where the question comes up. Do you include the hat or not? Whenever you crop it like this with the whole hat visible, the eyes are in the middle of the frame. But if you were to crop it like that, just crop off the top of the hat, now the eyes move up onto the top third. So this is how I would present this in competition. So as opposed to that, I prefer that type of crop because the eyes are up on the top third, and it just works so much better. Tony, I'll sell you that if you can afford it.
Thank you, Ross.
So another question that you might ask yourself is, do you want a portrait sitter to look towards the camera? So here we have a beautiful African model, and she's looking towards the softbox. And there's with eye contact. For me, the one with eye contact works so much better. I am a big fan of eye contact. So whenever the model looks towards the softbox, you do get this lovely catch light over the eye, and it really does bring the iris to life and the pupil to life. But I much prefer eye contact for a portrait. That is Anna Rose. She's London-based gymnast, and she's not a professional model. But I think she's stopped modeling now. She's got quite a good job in the health service. So unfortunately, I don't think I will be photographing her again. So Fredo again. And we've got this lit side of the face and the shadow side of the face. So there's the clue, the catch light in the eye coming in from the left. And that gives you this, so this is what I call the lit side, and this is the drama side. This is where the shadows are, these lovely, rich, deep shadows in here where the light can't physically get in. Another friend, you'll probably see maybe 6 or 7 photographs of Derek throughout this presentation. He also is an extra in Game of Thrones. He is quite a striking model. He sometimes has just a moustache, sometimes has the beard, but this was sort of a personal portrait. It was not done to create a character. This is him as he actually is. So I think he has this one on a business card. This guy is a professional footballer. He is he's Dublin based, but now, in fact, I think he's back in Dublin. I think he plays for a Dublin club now, but he was playing for a local Belfast club. Very good footballer, and he makes for quite a striking subject. The idea here was to sort of create almost like the appearance of a boxer, even though he's not a boxer, he's a footballer. But my black and whites, I would always describe them as a pint of Guinness. So you have the dark blacks and then the highlights of the cream on the top. A lot of people, their black and whites are too lacking in contrast. I think the clue is in the name, black and white. So do have high contrast, do have a good black point and a good white point. The inspiration for this one was obviously Steve McCurry's Afghan Girl. So this girl's eyes were not green. I had to do the green iris in Photoshop. You can see it was taken in quite a dark studio because we've got quite a large black pupil. I normally prefer to have the pupil small so that the iris is much more apparent. But that was just simply my attempt to recreate Steve McCurry's Afghan Girl. Anna Rose again. So again, black and white. This was a piece of red material that was thrown around her shoulders to basically frame her shoulders. and she's looking towards the light, and we've got this fabulous shadow side with all the rich shadows here on the side of the face that is more open to the camera. Now, this is very definitely beauty lighting. So this is this absolutely shadowless approach. I've basically surrounded the model with light, and older people would love, an older lady would love this because it will fill in all the, any wrinkles on her face will just get filled with light and therefore be less visible. But if you look at the catch lights in the eyes, you can see I've got a softbox on the left angled like that, and a softbox on the right angled like that. And then the camera comes through the middle. And there is also a white reflector that you can see in the iris in the eye, but that is absolutely shadowless light, and that is why we call it beauty lighting. This is digital composite, obviously. I have tried to create the impression that her hair has branched out into its own sort of tree-like hair strands. So you can get a branch brush, you make a branch brush in Photoshop, but if you use it as a brush, you have to pick a color. What I did was I used the branch brush with the clone tool. So I cloned from her hair with a branch brush, and that's why the little strands of hair, as they're supposed to be these mini trees, actually have a sort of a three-dimensional, you know, they have highlights and they have shadows and midtones. And then of course I put in the little butterflies as well. So that one is called branching out. Connor. So this is another friend who is a very good photographer. He's a member of Bangor North Down Camera Club in Northern Ireland, but he again loves to dress up. He has this fantastic curly moustache and beard, and just makes for a great subject. Anna Rose again. So I bought this chainmail from Germany on eBay, and it just, you know, rather than using a material shawl, it effectively becomes a metal chainmail shawl. And again, I like to think that it's a proper black and white rather than a low contrast, what I call 50 shades of grey. You can see all the individual catch lights in the eye. Whenever somebody has a very, very dark pupil, you really want to bring it to life with catch lights. So I have a catch light from the actual softbox, and then I have a reflector panel below and a reflector panel on the right, all of which really bring her iris to life. Connor again. Now this is quite a good technique. If you look at the whites of his eyes, you will see that they are all one. Normally when you look at somebody, the bottom of their iris will touch the bottom of their eyelid, and therefore you have a white corner on this side and a white corner on this side. But if you get the subject to slightly dip their chin and you stand slightly taller and shoot slightly down, then you get this, the whites of their eye all become one because the iris is above the eyelid. And we call it a canoe. So the whites of the eyes are canoe shaped. I'm not sure that canoes actually look like that, but that's what it's always been called for me, the canoes. Right, Derek down to Nikita. So this is Derek again. He very much reminds me of Sean Connery in this. So for any of you film buffs, he just had a sort of a Sean Connery smile there. But that is Derek. He wasn't trying to be Sean Connery, but as soon as he gave me that smile, I just laughed. I had to put the camera down, and I said, "You just that's a Sean Connery capture." And again, rather than if I bring the light in from the front, this would all be very bland. Whereas when you bring the light in from the side, and there's the catch light again on the left, you end up with the shadows and the highlights. Lighting is not so much about where you light, it's where you don't light. It's creating shadows. So we've got this shadow of the nose, we've got this shadow side of the face, and that makes the face very three-dimensional. And the more three-dimensional you make your photographs, the better they will look. So this is the same guy, just on a different, maybe a year later or a year earlier. And I processed this one actually just fairly recently. And very often, if I see the final image as being a monochrome portrait, I will set my camera to record a RAW file and a large JPEG. But the JPEG will be in monochrome picture style. So whenever I put my card into Lightroom afterwards, I can import a RAW file, which is always in color, and a monochrome JPEG. So people sometimes ask me, what was your black and white conversion technique? And I say, well, it was always a black and white image. It was a black and white JPEG. So in effect, the camera has made it black and white. But then what I do is obviously I come in here and I dodge and burn the image. I've brought down the brightness of his hand here. I've brought down the brightness of this hand and this cuff. And I've brightened this area in here. And hopefully you're drawn into the eyes, into the face. His ear was quite bright. I think initially his ear was the brightest part of the photograph. So I had to darken his ear, darken this side of his face, and then brighten this. So Derek again, you know, there he is with the cloth cap and a jacket and tie. And there he is with a leather jacket, a t-shirt, and looking more like a biker. So he just loves to dress up. He is essentially an actor. He actually works for the local tax office, but he loves acting and does, you know, he appears on local advertisements on the television, etc. as an actor. But he is a great friend to have, to be able to photograph. So this lady was doing a promotion for, you know, Grey and Proud. Her hair was going grey, and she just decided, I'm not going to dye my hair, I'm just going to be happily grey. And she started sort of a movement locally for ladies over 50 who wanted to be grey and proud of it. So I thought that she made quite a striking photographic model with the grey hair. And obviously then I used the grey fake fur around her shoulders to match the grey hair. Profiled, so you can photograph people, you know, 3/4 towards the, you've seen a lot of them where they're photographed 3/4 towards the light. So rather than being face on, they just turn their head 3/4 towards the light. This is a profile, so it's completely side on. This one got me the certificate for the best portrait in the FIAP World Cup about 5 or 6 years ago. The model is a lady called Ekaterina, but she had her hair done and the hairstylist wanted it photographed front on. But I said, whenever we'd taken that shot, I said, just stand side on, please. And I took that shot, and that one became the actual shot that the hairdresser herself used. Holly, a local friend, not a professional model. So again, use your friends, use people that you know, ask them, will they, you know, model for you in the studio. Holly actually works doing care packages in the health service, but she just loves to come into the studio and model for me. I would use her as a model on some of my workshops. And again, look at the hand side on. Can you imagine that hand being face on to camera? The hand becomes as big as the face, and she has just turned her wrist sideways and curled the fingers nicely. Holly again. So again, the drama of the lit side of the face, the shadow of the nose, the Rembrandt triangle. I would have preferred that her hair didn't come down over that eye, but I only noticed it afterwards. But at least the eye is still partly visible. Might have been better if it was either not visible at all or fully visible. So we've sort of got a halfway house there with the shadow eye. Gerald again. So this one got me a medal, gold medal in the Welsh exhibition last year, I think it was, as a mono print. And again, it's putting the eyes up towards the top of the frame. People have said to me, oh, I wouldn't like to meet him in a dark alley. Whereas the reality is that, if you were in trouble, he would be one of the first guys you would call to come to your rescue. He has this hoodie, and the hoodie has been photographed by more people coming to my workshops, but it just gives him that. I just say to Gerald, give me that look. And his eyes just zero in on your lens, and he sort of gives this very stern look towards the camera. But I haven't been kind to him. I don't think his mother would want to put this up on the wall. So I have made him look a little older than he is. I have really brought out the wrinkles. I've enhanced any of the textures in his skin. So he is not as old maybe as he looks in that photograph. But I think it's quite a striking male portrait. Beautiful Indian girl. She now lives in Dubai, actually. She lived in Belfast with her mother and her sister went to work in Dubai several years ago, and now the whole family, the mother and the two daughters, have all gone to Dubai. So unfortunately, I rarely get to photograph this lady anymore, but absolutely beautiful Indian features. And she brought this Indian shawl, which was quite a colourful shawl, and it was so colourful that I actually thought it competed with the beauty of her face. So that was why I made it black and white. I have done a little bit of dodging and burning on her iris because, again, very, very dark pupil and dark brown iris. So you have to bring it to life with the catch lights. And again, I mentioned it before about the framing, whether you cut off the hat or cut off the top of the head. And absolutely no hesitation for me from a compositional point of view to crop off the top of the head and put the eyes up on the top third. But I've always loved that portrait. So I suppose you could describe my approach to studio photography or portrait photography as almost Beauty and the Beast. So with apologies to Tony, I'm not calling you a beast. I always photograph either the beauty or the beast. So it's either a beautiful female or a guy with real character and a beard. So jokingly, I refer to it as the Beauty and the Beast approach to studio portraiture. This was all natural light. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed that there are two catch lights in his eyes, and yet I've said it's all natural light. So yes, it is all natural light, but I have a friend standing over here with a silver pop-up reflector, and he is bouncing the light. There's an open barn door here to the left, and he is bouncing the light off the reflector, and I've then dodged the reflector, possibly over dodged the reflector in that eye. But this guy is quite a character. He does horse-drawn hearses for country people in Northern Ireland. So any country people who want a horse-drawn hearse for their funeral, this guy is your man. One of my signature portraits. It's called One Black One, One White One for obvious reasons, with the black glove and the white glove. And again, it's quite a brave crop. So I've really put the eyes right up to the top of the frame and made it almost a letterbox type crop. But this makes a beautiful print on a fine art, textured fine art paper. It's absolutely dead on a luster paper. Whenever I present it as a print, I ask people to flip it over and look at the back, because on the back I have the same digital file printed on the wrong paper. And it's a good example to be able to show people, look at the difference your paper choice can make, because on the textured fine art paper, this background is getting very close to pure white, but it has lovely texture in it from the textured paper, and her skin has a lovely texture to it. And again, people wonder whether they're looking at the texture of her skin or the texture of the paper. And the answer is you're actually looking at a little bit of both. But on the back, on the wrong paper, on the luster paper, it's just dead by comparison. So paper choice for those of you who do prints is very important. Mishka, she's an English-based professional model, now lives in Norway. And this one did okay as a color print, but whenever I made it monochrome, it won lots of awards. So it was really quite a good choice to make it monochrome. I always do like red, so red material or a red shawl will always be a good choice, but I much preferred it in monochrome. And I was delighted to get the front cover of the Photographic Society of America Who's Who in Photography magazine in 2018 with that one. So that magazine would have arrived either in hard copy format or digital format into the letterboxes or mailboxes of, I don't know, tens of thousands of photographers throughout the world. And my photograph was on the front of it. So getting a front cover is always a massive honor and privilege. Mishka again, so that's the same lady. She always has this curl that will come down over one eye. She sort of made it a bit of a signature. Melissa, local friend, fantastic long blonde hair. And again, we've got the lit side of the face. So this is quite unusual for me. Normally I have the light coming from the left. Here we've got the light coming from the right, but we still get that same effect. The lit side of the face and the shadow side of the face, but the shadows are not overly dark. They're nicely filled with reflectors. And what essentially we've done here from a compositional and posing point of view, we've created a triangle. So with this elbow outstretched, this acts as a leading line to bring you up to the face. Derek again, so you've seen him as a biker. So here he put on his monocle and became the sort of old English country gentleman with his monocle. And he didn't have a beard at that time, so we just had the moustache. But he just looks the sort of typical English country gentleman. And same day, 5 minutes later, he steps out from behind the screen with his t-shirt and leather jacket and gives you the stare. So obviously I've created quite a moody lighting on this one to sort of match the styling that he went for with his tattoos and his t-shirt and rock effect. An Indian traveling model, so she's an Indian professional model but travels all over the world. I think this was her second or third trip to Belfast. I had not worked with her before, but somebody else had worked with her in my studio and recommended her because of all her Indian styling and costumes. So the camera was not on a tripod for this. I just handheld the camera in front of her and took probably 6 or 7 shots. She just basically held her hands in front of her, then out to the side, but she brought them up in all different angles. And I know some people who have produced one with about 7 or 8 sets of hands coming out here, but I thought that 3 sets of arms and hands were plenty. So this is Gary, the local barber, obviously going for what we call a Peaky Blinders type of styling. And this was quite funny because he was in the changing room getting dressed, and he shouted, "Ross, Ross." He says, "You're not going to believe this." He said, "I forgot my trousers." And he had come in wearing these camouflage shorts. So he actually is wearing camouflage shorts. And I just obviously cropped them more or less out of the picture. But the idea was to do this full length with this styling, but he forgot his trousers. So it ended up a 3/4 portrait. What I've done here is add a texture. It's a grey cloth background, and I've added a texture not only over the background, but also over his face and his hands and his shirt, etc., over the whole thing, and just played with the opacity of it, just to create that sort of grungy effect. The red shawl. So this one was quite a popular image in competition. It won quite a few awards. I'm not a big fan of the plastic skin, so you will have noticed that her skin is really quite plastic looking. Unfortunately, I had no option but to go for that effect because it was quite a hot sunny day, and she had quite bright hot spots on her forehead and on her nose and cheek. So the only way I could try and even it out was to basically go a little too far with the skin softening, but it didn't stop it doing very well in competition. Ayla Rose, she's a Ipswich-based professional model, and this was a lovely new background that I bought. It's made by Westcott. It's called the Glyn Dewis background, so some of you might have heard of Glyn Dewis, English-based professional model or photographer, and he does this Westcott background collection. So Ayla just simply wearing this blue tutu, ballerina tutu. There's only one light here. I always use this on my workshop to say, if you can't light with one light, you can't light at all. So you should always use, typically I will use one light, but I will then use lots of reflection. I don't even think I had any reflection in this. It was just basically one light. This is quite a clever lighting setup. So it creates a rim light effect. So if you look all around the edges, you've got rim light on the outside of her arm, on the outside of her fingers, rim light all around her fingers, all around her chin, rolled nose, forehead, hair, everything, literally rim lit right around. And the light is above her and behind her, with a silver reflector also behind her, below the light, and that is kicking the light from the light from above comes down, lights her hair, but then it also hits the silver board and comes back up again, and that's where you get this lovely light under the chin and under the nose, etc. So it's a lovely, very simple lighting setup, but creates a very dramatic portrait. If any of you entered the Bristol International Salon 2 years ago, you will have this magazine on your desktop or on your coffee table. This one got the front cover of the Bristol International Salon. It's called Sarah in Blue, and it was just a feather collar that I got made by a makeup artist. And I then I used the color picker to pick up the color of the blue feathers and then painted that in over her iris. So her iris became the same color as the feathers. And again, eyes are up on the top third. That, you know, if you take one thing away, take away the fact that you really do want to get the eyes up on the top third of your portraits. Connor, so this one is called Soviet Sailor. I bought the hat on eBay or Amazon or somewhere, but it is I think it's the real thing. It certainly feels like the real thing, but it came with about 3 or 4 different badges. I've no idea what the Russian or writing says, but Connor just, again, loves dressing up. So all this bling, these rings, you know, this is him. He does wear these, but the black and white dodging and burning, just to give this a bit of punch. This one got into the Masters of Print for the PAGB this year. Derek again. So this was a composite. So he is shot in the studio and then cut out and put into the pedestrian subway background. And I have blurred the background and I have played with the color temperatures so that it more or less matches the color temperature and brightness and contrast of the background. For anybody who's interested in trying this sort of thing, if you Google me on YouTube, I do have a video on YouTube of start to finish. So it starts off preparing the background, blurring the background, cutting out Derek, putting him in there, refining the cutout, and getting to the final image. Again, a pedestrian subway used as a background. The advantage of this background was that it's circular corrugated iron, and it's a subway up to a train station in Belfast. It's within a mile of my house here, and it's 2 layers. So if you imagine the background layer is one, and then this guy is shot in the studio, cut out and put in on top. But if I was to remove him, if I was to click his layer off, there's a big blown highlight here behind him. So the end of the tunnel is a big blown highlight. So he actually covers that up. And the fact that it's circular means that these circular edges are fanning out from all around him. The boxer. So quite a close-in male portrait. He's not a boxer, but I wanted him to look like a boxer. He does have sort of quite a tough face, and there's a little scar there on his forehead. And all we did, the black cape around his head is actually the outside of a softbox. We didn't have a hood, and somebody came up with the very clever idea of using the black exterior of a softbox and just folding it around his head. But I've really darkened it quite a lot so that you should be drawn into his face and his eyes in particular. I put this up as a print on the wall, and somebody remarked, as they walked around the room, their eyes were just drawn to this portrait, and he says, the eyes just follow you all around the room. Derek again with his monocle. This one is called The Curator. The background is Edinburgh Museum, and I was over judging the Scottish Print Championships, and Hunter Kennedy brought me to the Glasgow Museum because we had a couple of hours to kill, and he was standing beside me whenever I took this, and I told him I was going to make a composite out of it. And several years later, he was judging the Scottish International, and this one did very well. But I asked him afterwards if he had realised that was the background that I had taken, but it completely went over his head. I think he'd even forgotten that he was there with me that day. But when you do a composite, you have the advantage of placing the eyes or the subject where you want them to be. So I've tried to create the effect of a leading line, so that archway supposedly acts as a leading line up towards his eyes. The red shawl, or sorry, the red hat. So this was the one that the GPU used to advertise this talk. It's so simple, you know, simplicity is the key. All you've got is a beautiful face and a red hat. And it has done so well for me in competition. Now, the problem with it was that out of camera, the shoulder was too bright and the face was too dark. So I had to do what I call tone reversal. So I had to darken her shoulders and brighten her face to get to the final image. I'm not sure what sort of time we have available, but I can do that very quickly or demonstrate that very quickly at the end. I think we're getting very close to the end of the actual portraits that I want to show. So I could finish off with doing a very quick digital edit on that raw file. This is the sort of portrait you get in the living museums. So anybody in Birmingham, for instance, you have the Black Country Museum. This is the Ulster Folk and Transport Museum in Belfast. So local people dress up in traditional costume and operate old machinery and tools, etc. So she is working away at a woolen loom, and she refused to give me eye contact. She said, "I'm happy for you to take my photograph, but I'm not going to look towards the camera." So that was fine. What they don't like is for you just to walk in and lift your camera up and take a photograph. They will absolutely do everything they can to stop you getting a decent picture if you don't talk to them. So I only know that because when I went in, I said, "Sure, look, I'm a local club photographer. Are you happy to pose for a couple of photographs?" And she said, "Absolutely, thank you for asking, because if you hadn't asked, I would have turned my back towards you once you lifted your camera." She said, "We hate the people coming in, just lifting their cameras, having no dialogue with you." So I don't know how you could take a decent photograph of somebody unless you have made some sort of connection with them. So that would be one of my final tips. Do talk to your subjects. I absolutely insist on my workshops that the people talk to the person they're photographing. You can talk the biggest load of rubbish or whatever, as long as you're connecting with them. Then they're, you know, I always get them to walk up with the camera held at waist level. You can't walk up with the camera in front of your face and just expect to take a photograph. You should really say, "Hi, you know, I'm Ross. I want to take a headshot here. Want to take a 3/4 shot." Let them know the type of photograph you're taking, and then they can pose accordingly. I think this is the last one. This is called Under the Weather. This is, again, obviously a digital composite. The starting point for this was a white new blank document in Photoshop, and I put in the tiled floor, put in the wall, put in the city background, put in a cloudy sky, put the seat on, then put the guy on the seat, and then put on the shadows. And I took a photograph of him whenever he fell asleep on a bench in Belfast city centre outside the city hall. And somebody said to me, "What would happen if he walked into an exhibition and saw that print up on the wall?" And I said, "Well, first of all, he would say, 'Flip me, I don't remember falling asleep on that seat in thunder and rain and lightning.' But if he wanted to say that I didn't have the right to take the picture, he would have to convince a judge that I had breached his expectation of privacy. But if you fall asleep on a seat outside Belfast City Hall on a Saturday afternoon, you can't really expect to have much privacy." So that one is called Under the Weather. And those are the portraits that I intended to show you. Saeed or Tony, do we have time for me to do a very quick digital Photoshop on that red hat image?
I don't see why not, Ross. There's only 1 minute past, so we started at 5 past, so yes.
Okay, so let me just try and find it here. So there is the raw file. I'm just going to open that in Photoshop. So that is how it came out of camera. And then obviously we finished up with something that looked more like this. So we went from that to that. So that was how I envisaged it at the start. So whenever I was looking at this as a raw file, I had to make my mind up, right, what do I need to do to this? And obviously one of the things that I realized, this is the brightest part of the picture, but you want the viewer to be brought into here, to this one eye. So the first thing that I would do is to look for any blemishes on her skin. And I would just use the spot healing brush. I'm using a Wacom pen that is pressure sensitive. And you can see there are very, very few blemishes on Amber's skin. So there wasn't really very much that needed done. Command 0 makes the image fit the screen. So I always work with duplicate layers. So Command J gives me a duplicate layer over here. So over here in the layer panels, we've now got the background layer and the layer above. So if I go image adjustments, curves, I can just click on this little hand tool and click on the skin tone that I want to darken and just drag down. So as I'm dragging down, it's getting darkened. Now obviously that has darkened the whole image. So what I have to do is apply a black mask. So I do that by holding the Option and clicking on the mask. So underneath that black mask is this darkened area of shoulder. So B for brush, X to make sure I'm painting in white, not for 100%, so in fact I'll paint at 30% opacity. So rather than going up there and moving the slider, if I just hit 3 on my keyboard, I'm immediately painting at 30% with a nice soft edged brush. So I'm just painting I'm painting a white hole through that black mask to reveal what is underneath, which, as we know, is the darkened layer of her shoulders. So before, after, and I'll just make that a bit more. And if you go too far, if you think that's too much, you can just play with the opacity. Oops, it's getting a wee bit too obvious where I'm painting. Oh, in fact, I'm painting on the image rather than the mask. You always need to make sure you're painting on the mask and not on the image itself. So if you think it's too much, before, after, you can play with the opacity. And again, rather than moving that slider, if I go V for Victor and hit 6, I've reduced the opacity of that layer to 60%. I'm probably going to go about 80% on that. And once I'm happy with it, I just flatten image. And now I need to do the reverse. So Command J for a new duplicate layer, image adjustments, curves, and I'm going to click on this skin tone here, and I'm going to drag up. And black mask. So underneath this black mask, you can disable a mask by shift clicking on it. So I am shift clicking on the mask to see what is revealed underneath. So B for brush, nice soft edged brush at 20%, 30%. And I'm just building it up, painting in some areas more than in others. there's the effect of the before and after. Now I have painted this mask, there's the mask. I have painted that with the softest brush available to me in Photoshop, but the transition from the areas that are not affected, which are in black, to the areas that are affected, that are in white, it's too severe, even with a soft edged brush. So I can blur the mask, filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and if I type in about 100, and I'm going to do that again, filter, Gaussian blur, and maybe one more, filter, Gaussian blur. Look how soft I have made that transition from the area that's being brightened. So there's no giveaways in the image. Flatten image. And I did work on the eye as well. I did brighten the eye. Command J, image adjustments, levels, and I'll just go auto levels on that. Black mask, B for brush, not for 100% opacity. I tend to go too far with the eyes and then bring back the opacity. I'm now going to paint outside at, say, 40%. So I've just hit 4. You can see up there, I'm now painting at 40% over the whole eye socket. And I end up with a mask like that. Oops, I can see in the middle where I've missed a bit. So there's the effect of that, but I'm going to blur it again, not by 100. So filter, blur, Gaussian blur. I'm going to blur it by maybe 30 pixels. So there's the effect of the 30 pixel blur. Before, after. Flatten image. And I still think that the face needs to be brightened that little bit more. I do have I've created an action called brightness 10%. If I just, there it is there, brightness 10%, press play, and in a split second, it gives me a duplicate layer that is brightened underneath. So if I paint B for brush, 3 for 30% opacity, and just give that another little kick, that is much better. And again, I will just blur that. I'll go a wee bit too far and then blur it. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur, type in maybe 75 this time. We'll do that again, filter, Gaussian blur. And there's the effect of that final transition. So we've gone, if I go into my history section and take a snapshot, we've gone from that to that in a couple of minutes. So where is the viewer's attention brought now through the use of just simple dodging and burning, brightness and brightening and darkening techniques? I've gone from that to that. So there we go, folks. I hope you have enjoyed my presentation. I am quite happy to take any questions.